Who starts World War III?
If Ukraine uses an ATACMS missile to strike a target inside Russia, that is in Kursk Oblast, Russia will say that that's an attack by the United States. It will be a state of war between the United States and Russia.
A bit of breaking news. We're hearing that the Russians are reporting that Ukraine has now used these ATACMS ballistic missiles. More on that later.
Yeah, it looks like an escalation is coming. Okay,
this is the second video of the week that we're making about this, because I'm watching this thing and I'm praying and I'm talking and I'm reading the prophecies, and I'm beginning to realize, friends, the very thing we are told, Testimony for the Church, Volume 9, Paragraph 2, the agencies of evils are combining their forces and consolidating. They are strengthening for the last great crisis. Great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. And that's what we are looking at today as we speak about this matter. Let me tell you what's on the horizon today. Yesterday, we spoke about how a day ago, Biden had given access and permission for Ukraine to use these long-range missiles, which was a direct reverse to Washington policies before, which could eventually escalate the war between Ukraine and Russia. And we spoke about this yesterday. There was a video about that. But here is the update. Ukraine reportedly uses U.S. long-range missile for the first time to blow up Russian weapons facility as Putin issues nuke warning to America.
This morning, Ukraine fired U.S.-made missiles into Russia for the first time. That's according to officials in Moscow. The move comes just 2 days after President Biden gave Ukraine permission.
And a major escalation on the 1,000th day of the war. The attack comes just 2 days after the Biden administration gave Ukraine the green light to use the weapons against targets inside Russia. The White House policy change comes after North Korean troops were deployed to help drive Ukrainian soldiers out of Russia's Kursk border region.
Today, we're talking about rapid movements. We're talking about drastic change. A day after we are told the permission was given, this morning, these weapons were used. What does this mean? In today's video, we're going to be talking about this, and I'm also going to share a number of videos. I'm going to insert that throughout our discussion today. Friends, we are living in troublous times, but I got to tell you something. Jesus has the prophetic clock in his hand.
So how do you believe, there's been a lot of big moments in this war. Do you think this perhaps is the most pivotal moment right now? And why do you think it's an existential threat for the future of Russia?
Well, first, let's start with two things. One, this isn't the first time that this issue has come up to the White House level. If you recall, back in September 13th, Joe Biden held a meeting at the White House. Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, came to this meeting with a British diplomatic pouch inside which were documents that Starmer wanted Biden to sign, authorizing Great Britain to release the Storm Shadow cruise missiles so that Ukraine could strike targets deep inside Russia, and also have the United States do the same thing with the ATACMS missile. The day before, September 12th, Vladimir Putin made an appearance on television and said, if this happens, it will be a declaration of war against Russia and will be treated accordingly.
Russian President Vladimir Putin issued a warning to the United States on Tuesday, lowering the threshold for a nuclear strike just days after Biden administration reportedly allowed Ukraine to use American missiles deep into Russia. So as a result of that, we are told that the updated doctrine, formerly known as the Basic of State Policy in the Field of Nuclear Deterrence, outline the threats that will make Russia, the world's biggest nuclear power, contemplate using such weapons. Oh boy.
So last night, after, a day ago, 2 days ago, we finally heard that the president had given Ukraine the go-ahead to use these U.S. long-range missiles at Russia. Ukrainian troops launched an attack against a Russian border region. with 6 U.S. long-range missiles. This comes after, again, Putin approved the updated doctrine lowering the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. How many times has this guy given us a red line and said, don't cross this or it will be World War III? And we've crossed it every single time. For a man who's backed in the corner, a man who is a bloodthirsty killer, you don't keep backing him into a corner. Or what happens? Eventually, he says, I'll have absolutely no credibility, and his people who have just been bombed with U.S. missiles, which he just said 2 days ago will be an act of war, has got to say, you know what? The worst thing I can do is not act, because I'll lose all credibility in my own country and throughout the rest of the world. We have entered a moment of madness. What Joe Biden did is impeachable. Who launches 62 days before you're out of the office? Who starts World War III?
It says the previous doctrine set out in 2020 decree said Russia may use nuclear weapons in case of nuclear attack by an enemy or a conventional attack that threaten the existence of the state. And this is being classified as one of those. And what is more disturbing about this is that what they are saying, the Ukrainians themselves do not know how to use this weapon.
Equipment, these ATACMS, for sure to be operated by Americans.
100%, it cannot be operated by anybody but the United States. It's just the way it is. The guidance system, the data that goes in, is developed by a special Department of Defense activity in Europe that does targeting for guidance systems like this. It's done by American-only analysts, geospatial analysts. It is communicated from this site to a downlink station in Ukraine, manned by the United States. This is classified communication, so it's using National Security Agency cryptology, which means that only Americans can touch it. Ukrainians cannot touch it. The data is downloaded there, and then to load it up on the ATACMS again, it is a link that involves cryptology. Only Americans can do it. So the mission is planned by the United States. The data is loaded into the missile. And when the button is fired to fire it, it's being, the Russians will say, fired by the United States against Russia, an act of war.
It's rockets and drones doing the talking, as President Biden agreed to allow Ukraine to use Western long-range weapons, according to 2 U.S. officials. It's a policy shift from the United States that Ukraine have been pushing for, the Biden administration resisting until now. The decision, European officials say, was driven by the arrival of North Korean troops in Russia and by a determination to help Ukraine hold on to territory ahead of expected negotiations. President Zelensky declaring the missiles will speak for themselves. But President Putin has warned the precision rockets, including US ATACMS, would mean NATO countries directly involved in the conflict. And overnight, President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., writing on X, the military-industrial complex seems to want to make sure they get World War III going before my father has a chance to create peace and save lives.
Together, Russia and the United States control 88% of the world's nuclear warheads. Putin is Russia's primary decision maker on the use of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
If long-range missiles are going to be applied from Ukraine into Russian territory, it will also mean that they are operated by American experts, military experts. And we will be taking this as a qualitatively new phase of the Western war against Russia, and we'll react accordingly.
I had a live streaming just a couple of days ago with Brother Larry, and we were talking about what is happening in the light of Bible prophecy and things like that. And one of the conclusion that we came to in order for the enemy to have his way, so that there could be an enforcement of the mark of the beast, as we find in Revelation chapter 13, Revelation chapter 14, Revelation 17, and so on. For that to take place, there has to be a crisis big enough for the people to compel such a move. And Brother Larry made the connection to looking at these things from a much bigger and broader perspective, seeing what the UN is doing. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that to show you where we're going as well, because what I'm also seeing is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, but it's happening in a way that most of us are not paying attention. Watch this.
You have to go, Lord, show us where this thing will go in time. And look at how things are being played out, and also understand history and understand civics, because you got to understand how the three branches of our government work. Once that goes away, once we have an executive branch by itself, and when I say executive branch, he controls everything. And there is, he's the unilateral person. Once that happens, then we have a problem. I think what people are looking at and what people are not looking at is what happened in September. This is what I want people to focus on. In September, the UN and the WHO got together and they passed a motion, okay, for the WHO to take over to have unilateral sovereignty over America in case of disasters and pandemics and any other issue where a national state of emergency, just like what we had during COVID.
Correct.
Once we have a national state of emergency, the government has full 100% power over the citizens. Okay, but now with this motion that's been passed in the UN takes over. The UN has that power. You see? And now the one who is in control of the UN is Rome. How is it control of the UN? Because right now, the secretary of the secretary of the UN, the one who's in power at the United Nations, is a Roman Catholic.
Oh boy.
Okay, so these are the things that we really need to focus on, because we're so focused on Donald Trump that if anything happens, and I believe there will be some kind of state of emergency in his administration, during his administration, I believe if he doesn't get rid of the WHO, if he doesn't defund them and get rid of them and pull us out of the climate accord, then we have much more of a problem. It's not Donald Trump. It's the Pope of Rome. Because once America, who's in bed with the United Nations, once that happens, then all nations are under one jurisdiction, and that jurisdiction is owned by Rome.
If you are wondering what we were talking about, this is exactly what he is saying. And I also have a video that I'm going to share with you as well that's going to address some elements of that. So the Summit of the Future, this happened in September 2024, and will produce an intergovernmentally negotiated action-oriented pact for the future. So this is serious. And there are a number of factors that they want to address in here. If you want to read much more on that, they have an entire 64 pages long where they go about the United States Summit of the Future outcome documents, Pact for the Future, Global Digital Compact, and Declaration on the Future Generation. There's a number of things mentioned here. If you go to page 16, guess what we find? We will accelerate our effort to restore and protect, conserve, and sustainable use of the environment. And there's also an effort to push forward. Are you ready for this one? The 2030 agenda. Yes, it is the same climate agenda. There it is in action number 12. We will plan for the future and strengthen our collective effort to turbocharge the full implementation of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development by 2020 and beyond. And they have a number of steps that they speak about here. This might be a good thing to read so that you have an idea of what they have in mind. So this is what Brother Larry was talking about. According to the Catholic World Report, to understand Pope Francis, you have to understand the Jesuits. Oh yeah, we understand who they are. Here is another article. Understanding Pope Francis, the Lord of the world. And this is old news, but really it brings us to the point very much to where we are today. So the book, The Lord of the World, is written by Robert Hughes Branson. And it says this: Pope Benedict XVI and Pope Francis recognize the prophetic character of this novel, which depicts the ultimate consequences of secular New World Order. What promises peace and progress in reality brings only destruction and despair. In the face of such evil can stand only one prominent. What is that? The Catholic Church. Oh boy.
We are in the end times battle, but we don't believe it's the end of the world. If you read the saints carefully, they say it's not the end of the world, it's the end of this era. Something new is coming. The greatest triumph of the church in all of world history is coming, when the whole world will become Catholic, the entire world. And here's something that happened to me last year, just to give you some idea how great this is, what's about to happen, a great victory. And this prayer and the smaller one on the bottom will bring the victory about.
It was Winston Churchill who once said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." So it is highly possible that the powers that be are looking for a crisis big enough so that they can implement whatever they need so that the Pope of Rome could have absolute power. And this has to also work in such a way to manipulate the emotion of the masses to get what they want. So a big enough crisis has to take place for power to be conceded and given over to the government, which behind the scene is controlled by the Pope of Rome.
The Pope is where you look towards to how to live your life as a Catholic.
But he's also a politician.
This is a time when the Pope is not just the head of the church, he's also the ruler of Rome.
Each one was competing with the others for authority.
Some people were willing to kill you for that.
In this video, this video is going to break down to you what the United Nations is doing and what it meant by that pact they were talking about and where this matter is going. Take a listen.
This is happening now. They are systematically undermining our freedoms, and we need to get the word out.
The most important issue that's getting the least amount of attention relative to its importance in our country, and like many other issues, we're going to be deciding on November 5 what kind of a country we're going to be, and it applies to this issue as well. President Trump had withdrawn the U.S. from the WHO, and of course the Biden administration, like every other disastrous decision they made, reversed those policies when the Biden-Harris administration got in charge. Well, later this week, the UN is going to hold a, quote, summit for the future. And they're going to produce, this is right from their website, an intergovernmentally negotiated, action-oriented pact for the future with a chapter on transforming global governance. Ascending beyond the powers being sought by its subordinate agency, the WHO, the UN is seeking even broader and more powerful authority, as you will hear a lot about today. The Biden-Harris administration apparently intends to fully support the surrender and compliance of the U.S. to the UN in these endeavors. They are aligned with the international globalists that hate America, that hate the Constitution, that hate our founders, that hate our founding Judeo-Christian principles, and they want America to become like the rest of the world. They don't want us to be subordinate to or governed by our Constitution. No, they want America to be subordinate to and governed by the UN, the World Health Assembly, and the WHO. And in fact, they intend to join with others at the UN summit this week to vote to award additional powers to the UN Secretary General. They seek to facilitate the evolution of the UN from an international cooperative body to an international governing body. These powers would be triggered by any one of a number of so-called global emergencies, whether it was a so-called climate emergency, a health emergency, a cyber emergency, or a gun violence emergency, whatever that's supposed to be, a financial emergency, or whatever they deem appropriate. And the Biden-Harris administration is in full agreement with the UN and the WHO on efforts to place us under their authority and to require such things as their international health regulations, including the surveillance of U.S. citizens, the censoring of dissenting views, and much more. The American people didn't vote for this, and they don't support this, and it's up to the people's representatives, that's us gathered here today, to have a responsibility to expose this and to reject this.
All right. Let's read this passage as we bring this video to an end. There's a lot here for us to think about and pray about. But I'll tell you what, the Lord is in charge. The prophetic clock is in his hands and he's watching over the affairs of men. We are told in GC 589, paragraph 2, Satan works through the elements also to garner his harvest of unprepared souls. He has studied the secret of the laboratories of nature. He uses all his power to control the elements as far as God allows. When he was suffered to afflict Job, how quickly flocks, herds, servants, houses, children swept away. One trouble succeeding another in a moment. It is God that shields his creatures and edges them in from the power of the destroyer. But when the Christian world have shown contempt for the law of Jehovah, and the Lord will do just as he has declared that he would. He will withdraw his blessings from the earth and remove his protecting care from those who are rebelling against his law and teaching and forcing others to do the same. Satan has control of all whom God does not especially guard. He will favor and prosper some in order to further his own designs. And he will bring trouble upon others and lead men to believe that it is God who's afflicting them. Lord have mercy. While appearing to the children of men as a great physician who can heal all their maladies, he will bring disease and disaster until popular cities are reduced to ruin and desolation. Even now, he is at work in accidents, in calamities by sea and by land, in great conflagration, in fierce tornadoes and terrific hailstorms, in tempests, floods, cyclones, and tidal waves, in earthquakes, in every place and in thousands of forms. What's going on? Satan is exercising his power. He sweeps away the ripening harvest, and famine and distress follow. He imparts to the world a deadly taint, and thousands perish by the pestilence. Those visitations are to become more and more frequent and disastrous. Destruction will be upon both man and beast. The earth mourneth and fadeth away. The hardy people do languish. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. And you know where this is going to go? Listen to the next few words. And then the great deceiver will persuade men that those who serve God are causing these great evils, and that the class that has provoked the displeasure of heaven will charge all their troubles upon those whose obedience to God's commandments is a perpetual reproof to transgressors. It will be declared that men are offending God by the violation of what? The Sunday Sabbath, and that this sin has brought calamities which will not cease until Sunday observance shall be strictly enforced. And those who present the claims of the fourth commandment, thus destroying reverence for Sunday, are troublers of the people, preventing the restoration to divine favor, temporal prosperity, and thus the accusation urged of old against the service of God will be repeated upon ground equally well established. And it came to pass, when Ahab saw Elijah, and Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? And he answered and said, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Balaam. As the wrath of the people shall be excited by false charges, they will pursue a course towards God's ambassadors, very similar to that which apostate Israel pursued toward Elijah.
We may live through the week, but if Ukraine does in fact attack Russia, as I've been told, the decisions have already been made. There will be no discussion. Very catastrophic results for Ukraine and NATO will be the product of it. And that means war. And that means World War III. That means nuclear weapons. That means we won't celebrate Christmas. I just want everybody to understand what I just said. For all the people out there saying, well, it's not a big, you won't celebrate Christmas. You won't celebrate Hanukkah. You won't celebrate Eid. You won't celebrate Kwanzaa. You won't celebrate anything. Life will be over forever.
Goodness, talking about dooms and gloom, let me read to you what the Bible says. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house so many mansions. If we're not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and to receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. May the Lord, by his grace, help us to get ready and stay ready as we draw closer to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one. Bye.